and welcome to my November reads. These are all the books I read in November, so I'm super satisfied. It feels like I've gotten back into my reading groove and all of the books were really nice, so I'm very excited to share all of those with you. Let's start with a history book, and this is called Eggs or Anarchy, and it's by William Sitwell. This book, did it sit well with me? Anyway, I wanted to read this book for quite a while. I've seen it around in bookstores and I finally got around to reading it. Now, it talks about Britain in World War II and specifically how they managed to feed the whole country. As you know, Britain is an island nation, so that means that whenever wars happen, it means that they can be locked inside, and this is exactly what happened somewhat during the World War I and then during World War II to a greater extent. And this book follows the food minister who was at first kind of like a social worker, but then a very successful businessman. So when they appointed him to care for Britain's food during the war years, he had a really nice mix of being socially conscious but also being a crafty businessman. Now, this book definitely suffered from William Sitwell not being a historian. As I understood, he's a food writer, food blogger perhaps, and it meant that several things were not as researched as they could have been. This really bothered me on some parts, but there were great anecdotes and great stories within it that made it a fun read. But I really do feel like this topic could be tackled in a better way, and if it will, in the future, I'll definitely read it. It's a quick read. It does feel like it's quite thick, but not really, because it's written not, like I said, in a historical way. It's more of a light reading. It was very interesting and I got a lot of cool tidbits from it that I can use in class. Now, the second book I read was The Reader by Traci Chee, and it's book one of Sea of Ink and Gold. This is a young adult book, and it can you please stop? This is a young adult book, and it's set in a world that doesn't have books, or where people don't read. They do read signs, and this is kind of a problematic theme, I understood, for a lot of the reviewers in Goodreads. So they really didn't believe the world that was created where people don't read. But I didn't let it bother me. This is a really cool book. I really like the 2 or 3 main characters that it had. It alternated between their point of view. I enjoyed the world that was created. I enjoyed the island nations. The map was really fun. And what was really cool about this book is that there was a book within a book. So the book that the main character was reading was kind of in the same universe. The idea is that this book that this main character has, Sephia has, is actually the book that holds all knowledge, and she can actually find herself in that book. And there are things crossed out, there are like ink stains inside, so that was really fun for me. Let's see. It has pirates. I mean, who doesn't love pirates? I liked it. I have the second book. I'm going to read the second book and then I'll get back to you if it was as fun as the first one. The third book I read this month was Acceptance by VanderMeer. This is the third book on Southern Reach series. The first book had the biologist and the first mission. Well, it wasn't the first mission, as they found out later, but a mission going into this anomaly that is confusing scientists. You've probably seen the advertisement or even the movie, but the movie doesn't follow, the Netflix movie doesn't follow the first book to a T, so there are a lot of things that differ, and I feel like, of course, the book is better. Anyway, the first book told the story of the biologist going into this weird place. The second book told the story of the new director of Southern Reach trying to make sense of what was going on, but there were so many secrets and intrigues going on, and it all blew up, and he had to escape, and he met the biologists, and the second book ends with them going into Southern Reach again. Now the third book follows them inside the anomaly again, and what they experience, what they try to make sense of, and what everybody was expecting were answers. But as you know, with this kind of horror book, the answers are never as good as the wait for it. But I did like the answers. I did feel satisfied. I didn't feel like, oh, could have been. Well, of course, everything could have been better. It didn't like blow me away, but I feel like this is a very solid third book. I feel like the author really showed that this is the third book, and he has grown, and he has a better grip of everything. This book is very hard to classify. Is it sci-fi? Is it fantasy? Is it horror? I read eco horror thrown around, so this kind of ecological horror that has nature turning against people. This was really fun, and it was weird, it was creepy, it was very tense, and it kept you on edge. So I really like that it was very consistent, and of course the first book will always be the best, but I do feel it's a very solid third book and the end of the series. I definitely recommend you to pick it up, especially because I don't know how much horror you read. I don't read a lot, and I do feel like this is a great example of a very current horror book. Fourth book I read was the second part of Carry On, or is it now? Well, this series doesn't have a name, but it's by Rainbow Rowell, and it's called Wayward Son, and it's a continuation of Carry On. It's a weird, well, it's a young adult book that stars these two characters, Simon and Baz, and also Penelope, who is Simon's friend. Now, this was the Carry On was really a mix or a joke of Harry Potter fiction, but it did change everything around enough that they couldn't be sued. Now, this is kind of author's attempt to really expand on the story, so there is no great evil lurking in the school anymore. The evil has been defeated in the last book, but of course, always, the new evil will come. They will go to a road trip in America because Simon is really depressed because he lost all his magic, and Baz and Penelope are trying to cheer him up, and they will get into a lot of different adventures. What are you doing in America? And there will be a lot of fun things happening. What I really love about this book is the banter, and it's so self-indulgent. There are so many tropes in it that are done so well, tropes that are done in a way that the author is very aware that this is a trope. All the vampires, all the magic, all the... just everything is really, really nice about it. I mean, this is one day read because you don't want to put it down. If you haven't read it, Carry On or this one, then definitely pick it up. It's so much fun, and yes, love it. Can't wait for the third book because this book set up the scene for the third book to happen. So yay, super excited. Hopefully it will come out soon. The fifth book I read this month was Muumeista miljoonabisnes. And it's by Nina Pulkkis and Liisa Vähäkylä. It's in Finnish and it talks about the business of Muumis, how Tove Jansson built up this big business. Well, she didn't build it up, it sort of happened, but it's very fun to see how it will grow from comic books to theater productions to various TV shows, and then at the end everything that comes with Muumin, with textiles, with cups from Arabica, with Muuminland in Naantali, and all that. As I understood, this is a companion piece to a movie that was filmed by one of those authors, and it's very fun. It was a nice challenge to read it in Finnish, and I did have to check some of the words, but it wasn't as hard as this one book I tried to read about economics in Finnish. It has nice illustrations. I've read the Tove Jansson's biography, which is one of my favorite books, and I feel like having read that, this was very nice companion piece to it. Maybe if you haven't read it, then it would be harder to keep up, but it was very logical for me how this was built up. And it's Muumin, how can you not love it? At the end I had to go and check out all of the different Muumin TV shows on YouTube because there are some weird ones. And yes, this was fun. I came out of it knowing more and wanting to buy more Muumin merch. Really fun book. I'm happy I picked it up. Crooked Kingdom, and it's part of the duology of what? Six of Crows, and it's by Leigh Bardugo, and it's really thick. I think it's the thickest book I read this year, and it was a lot of fun. It was definitely better than the first one, in my opinion. The first one was a really straightforward heist, and I found it really hard to believe that a bunch of 16, 17, 18-year-olds could manage a heist in a different country in a very secure place. But this took place in Rotterdam when they come back and they don't get the money that they were promised by this businessman who swindles them. So the six characters who are Nina, Kaz, Ineji, Violin, Jesper and Matteus. Yes, I think it's Matteus. And then the prisoner they bring back, then they have to try to get their money back and swindle it back. There are different plot lines going on, and we get a look back to all of the characters' history. So it's also really expanding on what the characters are like, why they are like they are, and just to the inner workings of their mind. I think this is why it's so thick. It's because it really goes into the history of all of the characters. And I feel like I'm kind of disappointed that there are only 2 books about these characters, because it kind of introduced us to them, and I want to know more. I want to know how these characters grow. But as I understood, the next 2 books are about a different character in the same universe, and the previous 3 books are only touching upon, I think, one character that is active here. So I want to know more about it. I found it really fun that the everything took place in Rotterdam, which is kind of like Amsterdam but kind of not, and the city was really fun to read about as well. Now, what I really appreciate about this book is that it's very quotable. It's something that I haven't seen for quite a while now, that when you read it you're like, oh, this burn, or just this was such a great quote that you want to take a picture of it, post it on your Instagram, or just share it with friends. This had a lot of quotes. The first one had as well, but this this was even better because you knew the characters, so the burns or things that they said were so much better. And of course the magic of it, the adventure of it, the fast-paced storytelling was really fun. Really loved it. Going to read the rest of the universe, of course. I hope that I can manage 6 books in December as well. I really loved reading so much. This was all. If you have any questions, please do leave them down below, and leave a like and subscribe, etc. Thank you for watching this. Bye!